Taaryns, thank you so much for being with me here today. I'm really looking forward to asking you lots of questions. I have so many things to ask you. Taaryn is this wonderful illustrator and designer, and you are creating all these beautiful sculptures, statues, I don't know how you call them as well. And I just love how colorful and bright your art is. And really, when I look at your art as well, I've noticed it's so sort of accessible in a good way. I think you make sort of complicated things really easy to understand for people in your art. And I don't know if that's some sort of ongoing theme or if that's just something that I see in it. And I think that is a really like a skillful thing to do, because sometimes that can be really hard. And yeah, I think we have loads of things to talk about. So thank you so much for being here. Would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit before we dive into all these different topics and questions?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for having me on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to your questions because I like being asked things about my work. It's always a nice feeling. So yeah, I'm Taaryn. I'm an illustrator and graphic designer. I think I've been doing this for maybe about 7 or 8 years, and then I've been running my own business full-time, freelance for the past 3 years. Yes, I do like both illustration and graphic design, and like you said, I love colour and pattern and playfulness and fun visuals, and on the side of that I run my own shop as well, where I make little sculptures and accessories with a material called jesmonite.
Oh, sorry, how do you call the material? What did you just say?
It's called jesmonite. It's like it's like a resin, but it's more plastic based, so it's like an acrylic based resin. And it's lovely to work with. It sets like a lot quicker than traditional resin, and it doesn't have any sort of toxic fumes either.
Really fantastic. I've never tried resin either. Yeah, it's something that's completely out of my comfort zone, making sculptures. I find it really interesting. So before my first question, and you're actually the first person who I remember asking this question to, is so I run a business called Makings and Musings, and Makings is the doing part, the making part, and Musings is the dreaming, the thinking, the sort of imagination part. Would you say you're more of a maker or more of a muser?
Oh, that's a hard question to start off with. That's a big question.
It is, isn't it?
Can you be both?
Yeah,
I think maybe I do lean towards the making side, being a doer. I'm a woman of action, I think. Yeah.
I think I'm too. I think I usually do things before I think about it long enough to think, oh, was that a good idea? But then I'm sort of already in the process.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So how did you start your creative journey? Have you always been creative? Have you been drawing since you were a child? How did you roll into this?
So when I was a child, I wasn't very good at drawing. I didn't really enjoy it much. I don't think I would consider myself an arty child. So as a child, I wasn't a particularly like good illustrator or drawer. I wasn't good at doodling what kids do. I was more into like arts and crafts. So if you could get like a little craft kit for a hobby, I would get it for my birthday or Christmas. So I really liked. I had a jewellery making kit. I was into calligraphy. I really liked doing embroidery and crochet and knitting. Because I would do those with my mum and my grandma. And then I guess when I got to school, I wasn't really arty. I wasn't good at art at school. And then I actually went to university to do a law degree, which I dropped out of because
I studied law as well.
Did you? Yeah. How did you find that?
Oh well, I finished my degree, and in Holland everyone does a master's, so I finished my master's as well. And then I started working in the UK, but my law degree was completely useless here. It's a completely different system, and I'm just not a typical lawyer. I'm much happier doing art.
Same. I feel you there. Although congratulations for finishing it. I didn't get that far.
No, it probably could. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit, does it?
No, it doesn't. I don't know why I tried to force it, but I did. And then I dropped out, and I'd worked in like marketing and admin and temp jobs. It was a bit of like a wilderness time. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I had a few friends who were graphic designers, and the places that I worked with had graphic designers, and I found that was a lot more interesting than what I was doing. So in my mid-20s, I retrained. So I did an apprenticeship in graphic design. And while I was doing that, I was working at an educational publisher's as like a junior designer while doing my apprenticeship. And then so while I was on that course, I actually discovered what illustration was. I didn't know it was a thing and that you could get paid for it. And my tutor had given me some portfolios of kind of graphic designers who lean more to the illustration side. And I was like, yeah, this is me. This is where I fit in. And so yeah, I'd still carry on working for a bit, but on that course is when I kind of started to do more freelance things. And then I moved to a studio, and that's kind of where I learned a lot of business stuff. So like pitching to clients, client communication, how to write a brief, all the things that I would need in a freelance business, I learned on that job. And then yes, I left it behind and went full-time freelance. That takes me up to now.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. Well, first of all, I know so many people who have been on my podcast sort of for the first season as well, that have studied law and then moved into art and into calligraphy and into doing other things. So I think a lot of people who study law, they sort of crave doing something creative, and then they move on from that, from the law part, and then move into a creative sector. So I find it really funny because when you think of people who study law, you don't think of creative people at all. But yeah, maybe they sort of filter out and they start doing
That's so interesting.
And the overlap with graphic design and illustration is quite close. And when I was young, I didn't really know what an illustrator was, and I knew that I loved children's books, and I actually knew someone who was a children's book illustrator, but I never made that connection in my mind as, oh, this is something I could study, or this is something that you could do as a profession. Only now I started to realize.
I didn't really understand like the difference between graphic design and illustration. So I didn't know that. I just assumed that if you're a graphic designer, you knew how to draw and you were good at drawing, which isn't the case. Like, you don't have to be good at those things, but that's where, like, I think where I really excel at, like what I'm good at, is like bringing that graphic design and that illustration and bringing them together.
Well, there's a big overlap, isn't it, between doing branding and then doing something really corporate, sort of graphic design, and then from the sort of children's book illustration. But there's such a big range in between where you can play and you can try out a little bit more of this or a bit more that. So
definitely.
What materials do you use when you do your illustration?
For illustration, I really like using gouache and ink, and I quite like collage as well. So all my like illustrative work, it usually starts by hand. I'm just trying to think what else I've got. I always tend to like really focus on gouache. I've got this set of Japanese watercolors. I can't remember the brand, but they're so good. They're so pigmented. It's like in the middle of a really thinned down gouache, but a really pigmented watercolor. It's like the perfect balance of gouache and watercolor, and I love using them so much. I only use the black one because I do all my work in black and then scan it into Photoshop. Like the rest of the colors are just like so pigmented. They're so good.
There's just something about really good pigments, isn't it? And I don't think art materials need to be expensive, because sometimes you can have really quite cheap materials that are really well pigmented. But I just love, I love bright colors and using a paint that just really sort of jumps off the paper. It's so much fun. And also when you scan things in, so I'm assuming you use a scanner, or do you photograph your work then?
Yeah, I've got a scanner, and I scan everything in like as big as possible, and then I bring it into Photoshop, and that's like how I like translate that into an illustration like a company can use.
Yeah. I just find it so much easier to scan illustrations that are really bright with really clear colors than it is to have like really soft watercolors. That is just a nightmare to scan.
I can imagine those don't translate well.
So I know you do lots of you provide lots of information to sort of help other illustrators, which is really interesting. Because you have your ebook and you write blog posts and things like that. How did you start with that? Is that something you started to do recently, or?
It's always been a part of my practice, and it's something that's like really important to me. I feel quite conscious of the fact that when I started, I didn't like go to art school. I didn't do a graphic design degree. The stuff that I'll learn, like freelance stuff, is stuff that I kind of picked up from other people, like reading their blogs, trying to like find bits and pieces of information, and then kind of like learning things as I go along, but also doing things wrong and then learning the lesson from that. And if you like retraining like I did, so you've already left school, you don't really have that support network of school or like college or university. You are like on your own, and you don't have that same network either. So if you are trying to like retrain and do something different, it can feel like you're a bit lost, or like you're in a bit of a wilderness. So I always try to keep that in mind when creating resources. Like I firmly believe that, you know, you should bring people up with you rather than just like, you know, forget about it. So yeah, that's always like been a really important part of my practice.
I totally agree, and I think it is quite hard when you start a career later and you want to sort of retrain, and you don't really want to go to school again for 4 years, and especially in the UK, like who can afford that? So yeah, it's so helpful if you have people who share their information with you, and especially when I started, I remember, yeah, I loved just watching YouTube videos where people explained how things worked and how their career went, and yeah, it's something like your ebook is so useful for someone who's thinking of starting as an illustrator, or maybe just wants to illustrate as a hobby but would love to do a children's book one day. There's lots of people who are in that position.
Yeah, like I firmly believe in sharing stuff, because like people can get a bit like cagey about certain things, or they don't want to share things, but I'm the opposite of that. Like,
yeah, I think it's the same with ideas. If you have a good idea, no one is going to run off with your idea. Well, maybe if it's something that's patented or something, but when you're like, no one's going to run off with your idea. You still have to create it, and you still have to make it in your own way and in your own style and your own voice. And yeah, if you have an idea for a children's book, tell your friends about it. Like, don't keep it all to yourself, because that input is useful. No one is going to steal your idea. I think that's such a strange concept that we're sort of brought up to believe, that you have to keep things to yourself. And there's a term in Dutch which sort of works quite well in English, but I don't know if it works quite well in English, but it's conculega. So it's like a mix of competition, like concurrent, competition, and colleague, sort of a mesh of words. And I think there's this sort of big group of people sort of on Instagram and social media, and like, it's nice if you can be colleagues as well. And yeah, sometimes you compete for the same brief or for the same thing. Not, I've never really had that, but you might do in theory. But then, yeah, most of the time, if someone goes with you over someone else, or goes with someone else over you, it's for good reason, because everyone has such different styles. And yeah, it's not like the colleague part, I find much more important for me.
Yeah, I firmly believe like community over competition, because there's been so many times where I've had a job in, and either I'm busy or I might not be the right person for it, and I've referred other people. Like, I like to refer other people that I know, and then like that's happened to me as well. Like, I've had people referring me for jobs, so it works to your advantage to, you know, get to know other people.
It really does. Do you remember like a learning moment early in your career where you thought, oh, I'll never do this again?
Oh,
you don't have to, if there's any nightmare clients, you don't have to name any names, of course.
I mean, I did have a really nightmare client just recently, but it's actually too recent to talk about, so I probably shouldn't do that.
I'll invite you back next year, then we can talk about it.
Yeah. Ask me next year. I'll fill you in. I think I can't remember specifics, but it usually comes down to like not having a tight contract. So the contract that I have now is it's good because I've added in contract terms from when I've been burnt by a client. So like every time I've learned, I've updated my contract. Like it's really hard in like those early days because you're quite new to it, but with time you get like a sixth sense of, oh, this client is no good, I'm not going to work with that person. I'm definitely better at saying no to things that like just don't fit, and I think once you get better at that, you have less client troubles.
And on the other side, do you have any projects that you're really proud of, or that you really loved, or that you can share? Maybe something that's finished.
Yeah. So I used to work with this like small studio in Manchester, and they got in touch with me like really early on in my career, and they wanted me to design a poster for a market. And honestly, it was like the best piece of work that I've ever done. It's still on my website now. I still refer back to it when I feel a bit lost with my work. Like the budget was terrible, and they knew this, but like they had like just let me have creative control, and they were happy to kind of reduce the amount of amends to make it work. And yeah, they just let me get on with it, but in a good way. Like, you know, when clients say to you, oh, you do whatever you want to do. Oh wait, I didn't actually want that. This client was like, no, Taaryn, you do you, and we will love it. And they actually did. And then I've worked with them several times since, and like every time I've worked with them, like I've been really proud of the work. I really liked it, and they really liked it because they're happy for me to do what I do best. And it's always been so easy working with that client. I don't work with them anymore just because the people that I worked with have moved on to different jobs now. But at that time, when I was like early in my career, it was just like the perfect job, perfect client.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so good when things just flow, isn't it? When you make things that you're happy with, and you know and they are happy with it, and you have the right amount of freedom. Because what you said, if someone says like, "Oh, just do whatever you think is right," and then they come back, they're like, "Oh, actually, I wanted a black outline." You're like, "Well, you should have said that."
That did happen actually to me, not last year, the year before. It was for like an annual report, and the client was like, oh, if you've ever wanted a client where you could do like the biggest, wackiest idea that you ever wanted to do, like we're the client to test it out on. And I was like, okay, cool, this could be okay. And then when I did a design, they hated it. They hated everything. And then they gave me like really detailed feedback about everything, and I just kind of said, oh, this is the kind of feedback that should have been in the brief at the start. Like, I'm not redesigning it. And they were like, oh, can we have custom illustrations of this, and this? And I'm like, this wasn't even in the brief, and you don't have money for that. So, oh God, I had to cut that one loose. That was awful.
I think everyone has stories like that, isn't it? I had a client once who asked me to illustrate something in someone else's style, and I said, well, I can't do that. It's just like really unethical, but also really hard, like to draw something in someone else's style, and it was a really specific style as well. So I said, well, I can do like something maybe a little bit inspired, like I can choose that color palette and then just do it in my own style, but it needs to be my style. I'm not going to copy anyone else's work. And they were just a nightmare. And this was for a book, and it was just really hetero. I should never have said yes, but it was a lot of money. And I thought, well, I need to do this book. But it was really sort of heteronormative, really cringe. Like, I like to put people, like in my illustration, I like to do diversity and people with all sorts of backgrounds and body shapes and disabilities and religions. And this was really like white girl meets white boy get together, like she wears like it was like as if it was set in the 1920s. Like, no.
Oh, that sounds awful. Any client that kind of pushes back on that is not great, because as illustrators, we have a responsibility to reflect the world that we live in. You can't really like whitewash over that.
No, I'm so in the end it sort of all fell through, and I got paid some amount, and I was just really happy it was over. Yeah. So what sort of does your day look like? Tell me a bit about how do you work? Are you working from home in a studio? How?
Yeah, so I work from home mostly. Like this is my home office setup. And like I can close the door on it at night. Like I don't share the space with anybody else, that's fine. I also have like a desk space at a studio that's near me. So I'll try to get there like once a week and do some admin. I did have it the other way around where I had a studio space and I had everything in that studio space. But it was quite inconvenient. Like I found I do my best creative work at home where I'm comfortable, and then a space outside of my house to do admin work that works for me better. So yeah, I'll usually start my day. I have to start my day with exercise of some sort. It just puts me in the right frame of mind. And I'll usually start like maybe around 10 or 11 because I'm not a morning person. I really struggle to get up in the morning. And then yeah, I'll try to like have a quick read through emails. I usually have like a week plan on a Notion board. So I plan the week out in advance. And so I know kind of roughly what I'm doing every day. And then yeah, like emails out of the way first, any kind of admin job first. And then if I'm working on a client project, I'll usually work on that in the afternoon. And if I'm waiting on client feedback and I'm a bit quiet, I'll usually take that opportunity to do something else. So I might just forget about work altogether for a bit, or I'll work on my shop. So I've got something to keep me occupied.
I think there's so much more extra things that come with running your own business that people sort of forget about, isn't it? Like I think I've probably spent maybe about 40% of my day making art, and it's because I do art classes where I make art and I film my courses and stuff. But I think that's quite high. Most artists probably don't spend 40% of their time making art.
Yeah, I definitely don't.
I think it's
really a lot of my time goes on
Google all day.
I was gonna say a lot of my time goes more on like it's like the admin side of things. So like I might have business documents that need updating, lead generation, or like networking. Those are the kind of things where I need to put more time and effort in. So yeah, they take priority sometimes.
And where do your clients sort of find you, or where do you find them?
That's really interesting. So I try to like schedule doing cold emails a few times of the year. Fairly recently, though, I'd say the last year I've not needed to do that. Like my work has come to me. So usually people find me on Pinterest, Twitter, and more recently like word of mouth. So if I've done work for a client, people will tell me, "Oh, I found you through this person." I get like a lot of publish inquiries. I don't tend to do a lot of publishing work just because the inquiries that I've had are like really well paid. But it seems like since I've been contacted by one publisher, I get contacted by other publishers. I think it's like a bit of a small world where people pass on recommendations to each other. So yeah, I get a lot of work through that.
And do you work mostly with like local businesses to yourself?
No, I don't tend to work a lot with local businesses. So I'm based in Leeds, and I probably only had really one local client, and it was part of the council. So the city has like an events listing website where you can see whatever's going on in the city. And then they hired me to do some illustrations for the website. And that was another project that I actually really loved, and the client were really lovely to work with. But I don't ever seem to do much local work. It's more further afield. It's still UK based. I don't tend to have a lot of American clients or European clients. But yeah, UK based mostly.
Interesting. I also find it really interesting that in your list of social media things, you said sort of Pinterest and Twitter sort of before you said Instagram. And I know so many illustrators who really rely very heavily on Instagram. I try not to, so I have Instagram and I use it a lot to connect with people, or for example, how I connected with you. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to utilize those other platforms to put your work out there. And I think, how do you find, is that a conscious choice, or is that just how it's grown?
Yeah, Instagram has never worked for me in terms of client work. And also my audience on Instagram is other artists. So I use it more for my shop because that's the kind of thing that they're going to be interested in. And also like any resources for artists, they're more likely to be interested in that. So like if you'll scroll down my feed, I can't even remember the last time I posted some actual commercial work, because like they'll still be interested in that, but they're not the ones commissioning me. I remember I contacted an art director and they said that they use Pinterest quite a lot. So I've made a conscious effort to put my work on Pinterest. And I found like when I ask certain clients, oh, how did you find me? They'll say, oh, your work has been on a mood board for us, or we found you in like our inspiration folder that we've had for quite a while. And it's always like come back from Pinterest. And then with Twitter used to be good. It's not good anymore. It's just, it's tanked. Like it used to be really good to like just connect with other like designers, other illustrators. There used to be like quite a good community on there, but you know, since everything that's happened recently, it's not as good, and people are just not using it in the same way.
I think a lot of people are leaving Twitter just more as to make a bit of a stance, but we'll need to sort of find out over the next year or so how that's going to play out. I think I don't really tend to use Twitter. I have a Twitter account, but I never really use it. I really like sort of slow social media for me personally. So, and I consider this podcast as part of these things. So podcasting, doing my YouTube videos, things like that. It's more like you create something that people can still watch in a year's time, or and I know my audience is a bit different from yours, because I have a lot of people who want to do art classes and things like that. But I like more slower things. I think this sort of hassle of having to post things every day is not something that I personally enjoy. So I'm just not doing it.
No, I'm not into it either. Like I don't do that kind of stuff on Instagram. I don't think like, oh, I'm planning out a week, I'm going to plan out what post I'm going to do every day. I don't have time for that.
No, I think that's interesting. So that's the same for me. I think there are so many different ways of doing things as well that feel like that are not energy draining. Because if you like to email all your clients twice a year, for example, that's like for some people find that really hard. But if that's something that sort of works quite well for you, then you need to sort of find ways of being in touch with people that work for you, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to spend more time this year on LinkedIn, and trying to focus any content that I put out on like what my clients want. So my clients aren't interested and seeing like a picture on Instagram, because that picture doesn't mean anything to that client. What they're interested in is like how what I do solves their problems. So like my content needs to be focused on that, which I'm still trying to get my head round, and it's work in progress, but I'll let you know how it gets on.
But it's interesting, though, isn't it? It also really depends on who your audience is, because if you do pet portraits, maybe Instagram is really the place to be. But
Yeah,
there's also
definitely.
people who want to buy like prints or individual portraits or things like that. But it never really worked for me.
Yeah, like because my shop is aimed at like consumers rather than clients. Then Instagram works for that. I mean, it doesn't, but it's more suited to that platform. Like similar to the person who would want to do pet portraits, your audience is going to be on Instagram.
Yeah, different, isn't it? Different group. When I emailed you originally, because I said, oh, do you want to paint together? Do you want to draw together? And you said, well, I prefer not. And now I'm really curious. So do you keep a sketchbook sort of personally? What do you do to relax? Do you draw at all for relaxation?
No, drawing is not relaxing. Actually, when I read your email, and I was like, oh my God, Irene wants me to draw on camera. Oh my God, no. I was just like, this is anxiety inducing. So for me, I think in the last couple, I think actually since my business has gone full-time freelance, I actually don't do any sort of doodling. I've never been a big doodler or a sketchbook. You can't see this on camera, but right here is there's like a storage unit, and this first drawer is full of sketchbooks.
Really?
Like empty ones that I've just collected. I might draw in once and never again. I don't find it relaxing. What if I want to do personal work? It's usually to kind of get a specific kind of client or to attract a certain kind of work that I want to do. And this might be like my design background speaking here, but I find it really helpful to like create a brief. So I'm in the middle of doing it actually right now. I've made like a list of personal projects I want to get done in the next few weeks. And so I'll start with an idea, and then I'll start on like mood boards, like who's it for, like how I want it to look. I treat it like it's a real project, which doesn't sound particularly relaxing. It's not. And then that's kind of what I do with personal work. But yeah, the kind of sketchbooking, drawing for relaxation, and yeah, I don't find it relaxing at all.
But it also sounds like you've never done that, because you said when you were a child you were doing more like craft projects or making like knitting and making things instead of making drawings. So maybe it's just not something that's it's a job. Maybe that's what it is.
And I know it's really weird. I'm like, I've not met anybody who feels like that, because in my circle everyone's like, oh yeah, pictures, drawing, doodling, art, yay. And I'm just like, it's the last thing I want to do.
Maybe it's a good thing though, because I know a lot of illustrators who have sort of lost their hobby because they made it into a job, and then suddenly the pressure changes, and you know, the demands, like the way you view art, everything is content and everything, you know, needs to be monetized and valued. So if you've never really had that as a hobby, then the fact that that is sort of the case and that your art is for work, maybe that's actually quite a nice thing. And then you have other things.
I think you're right there actually. Like it was never a hobby, so I've not lost anything. It's always been for commercial purposes. So
interesting. So what do you do for a hobby? What do you do instead of drawing?
Oh God. So actually my resolution this year was to get a hobby that was not linked to visual arts and not one that I could monetize. So I started a ballet class. So I did like a 5-week foundation course, and then now I'm in the beginner class. And I do that every week. And then outside of that, I'll usually be doing like my own little like online ballet class or like ballet bar conditioning. But like I like the class setting because it's 1 hour of my life where I don't think about my business. I can like just switch off, but I have to like learn something completely different and learn how to like use my legs in a different way, and then with my arms then coordinate them. It's really hard, but I've been really enjoying it. Just doing something completely different.
I did a ballet class a few years ago, and it's hard, isn't it? I really
It's so
underestimated
hard.
it.
Like I did some practice yesterday. My hips really hurt.
It made me face how unflexible I was, and the fact that I can't lift my leg without any support. Like some people, no, I just don't understand how people do it.
Yeah, I've got like really tight hamstrings, and I can't like lift my leg up very, very high. So when everyone else is like, woo, 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 I'm just like, oh.
That's me.
Everything creaks.
But that's the point though, isn't it? It's brilliant to be a beginner and to allow yourself to be a beginner and just to do something that you can't monetize, and it's just pure hobby. I think that's really good. Really really healthy to have that. Can you tell me a bit more about your flowers, about your
yes, I would love to.
How did you start with them?
So I followed
this.
I followed it. Oh, sorry, say that again.
Do you have one there that you can show us? Because I know what they look like, but people might.
I've got them like on my shelf behind me. So I'll show them. So I've got a yellow crocus and a snowdrop. And I've got a bluebell. And I'm working on some new ones, but they've not gone so great, so I have to redesign them. So I follow someone on Instagram. They're called Studio Evka, and she's a graphic designer, and she like started a jesmonite homewares business in lockdown, and that was the first time I'd come across what jesmonite is, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, the products were so cool and like really colourful. I don't think she makes them anymore, but I was like, this is really interesting. So I bought myself like a little Etsy kit, but it didn't go so well because the kit was just bad quality. So I signed up to do like a little workshop where I learned how to use it, and I was just like, right, this is pretty cool. Like, and the jesmonite homewares market, I don't know if you've seen this, and I'll link you to some later so you can have a look, but it's all like the same kind of stuff. People make the same stuff out of the same like molds. So it's all like pill trays or candlesticks, coasters, and I was just like, well, I can use this material and do something better with it. So I always like quite envied illustrators who got into ceramics, because I was like, that is so cool, like translating your illustration to a different medium. That's really cool. But I don't have the same kind of facilities. Like, I don't have a kiln, I don't have like a ceramic studio near me that I could sign up to. So this was like a different way of doing that sort of work, but at a different cost, and like it was just more accessible. So with jesmonite, you have to make a custom mold. I've not got. I'll show you actually. So like, it's a silicone mold, and it's made from like a 3D printed thing that I designed and made. So it starts off like an Illustrator, and then you need to export that and put it into like a 3D program. And I've never done 3D work before in my life. So that was new. That was something that I had to learn how to do, to make custom molds. And then I had to learn how to like make a mold. And there was so much that went wrong. And I was really frustrated with it. I documented it all on Instagram, like everything that went wrong.
I'll scroll down a bit and then
it was just, yeah. It was like such a learning process. It was just hard work. Like, there's so much stuff that went wrong. But what I really enjoyed is when something went wrong, I had to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. And then when you came up with a solution, yeah, that was really good. That was really cool. Like, I really enjoyed that. So yeah, like this bluebell sculpture was the first one that I'd made. And then I kind of like rolled it out to other flower designs. Like, I tried to keep it to like when they're in bloom, but like the designing process is so long, like I kept missing that. So they're a bit out of sync.
So you create, say, the illustration of the bluebell on Illustrator or another digital program, then you change it into Blender or another digital program to make that 3D. Then you make that mold 3D, and you get that mold printed at a company, or there's places that do that for you, right?
Yeah, but export it to a 3D printer, and then they would do that, because I don't have the brain power to set up a 3D printer myself.
I think it's really expensive, like to have a 3D printer. I think it's not something
they're getting more cheaper and more accessible, but I just, it's cheaper for me to outsource it. And then make a silicone mold out of that.
So do you paint them, or is the color inside the?
So the liquid part, so it's a liquid and a powder, and you mix them together and it sets. So the liquid is like an off-white color, and you can get pigments to add it in. So that's generally what I do. You can paint it, and you can get like different effects with it. But for me, I like to put pigment in and leave good to say.
Okay, cool. I've never really heard of this, so I'm just really curious. Yeah. I'm just thinking, you can make like paint palettes and like that's what I'm thinking.
I think with the version that
anything,
I've got, it's not waterproof, so you can't use it for anything. Like you can seal it and it's water resistant, but for like paint palettes, you can get a different version of jesmonite that's more cement based. And you could possibly use that one because people use it to make soap dishes. So
yeah, interesting. The and you sell these on your website, right?
Yeah, I do. I also like in the run up to Christmas, I'll do makers markets and sell in person, which I really like. Yeah.
Do you enjoy going to markets?
Yeah, they're really fun. They're really tiring though, like because usually it's like for a full weekend. And last Christmas, I booked one every weekend in November. I think I had 6 in a row, actually, 6 in a row. So that was like every weekend. And oh God, I couldn't even think straight after the end of that. It was hard work because it's a long day. You're on your feet, you're talking, selling, and some markets don't go so well, and other markets are really good. But it's a lot easier than just relying on Instagram to sell your work. So
I really like the idea of it, but I think Christmas markets, that time of the year is already so busy, and then to also do all these markets, I don't really have the energy for it. So last year I just thought, I'm not doing any.
No, that makes sense. But I in the run up to Christmas, I can usually make enough money where I don't have to do commercial work. So from maybe end of October to December, I concentrate on my shop. Like I don't do any commercial work, so I've got all the energy to put into it. I mean, it's still tiring, but like less so if I was managing client projects. I can't do both at the same time.
Oh, that's good. So you managed to like schedule holidays and to plan ahead sort of that way.
Yeah, so sort of like I don't think too much about holidays, which is really bad. Like usually my partner will be like, do you want to go on holiday sometime? And I'm just like, okay, when? And he's like, maybe this month. I'm like, no, I can't. And like, maybe in 4 months. I was like, maybe. Yeah. If I lived alone, I was alone, I probably would be really terrible at scheduling holidays.
Just work all the time.
Yeah.
I sometimes do all the sort of physical painting and stuff at home, and then if I go back to Holland or something, I just take my digital work with me, and then I can do that. There's a flyer. I can do that on the go. So I find it's hard to do if you work with traditional mediums. To take that with you when you're traveling is hard, but the digital part is okay. So that's what I do sometimes, but that's not a holiday. That's more of an see family and do some work at the same time, sort of. That's different, isn't it? Did you find it difficult to find your own style? I know that people are always searching for their style, whatever that means for them. Is that something that you find hard?
I think so. Yeah, it's been hard, but then at the same time, I can look at my work and I don't see my own style, because there's like a lot of different ways that I like working. So, and I think I have different styles within a style, if that makes sense. So what I like to call it is like an overarching voice. So I know the kind of work that I want to do and the feeling that I want it to have, but I can achieve that in different ways, and they might look different, but it's the same voice that kind of overpins all of it. But yeah, I think as artists we really get to hum up on style. The best thing to do is just forget about it, just ignore it, and just make work. I think early on in my career, I made like a mood board of people's work that I really liked, and it was several different illustrators. And what I would do is kind of just make notes on what I liked about the work, what I wanted to take into like my work, So for example, this illustrator, I really like their use of colour. I want to take this, or I like how this person used texture. And so like I've still got it somewhere, and I think I still refer to it at times. To kind of like help me stay on track with what I want to achieve in my work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did something similar at some point, and I think it's a really useful exercise. And of course, you should never copy anyone's style or anyone's work, because that also would feel really inauthentic. But there's no harm in just looking at what do I enjoy, why do I like this work, and it can be really like different styles as well. But what is it? You know, the color or the texture or how loose it is, or what is it that I like about it, and how can I use that in my own work? And I think that is a really useful exercise. So,
yeah, definitely. Like just taking that time to analyze work, like what you like and what you don't like, and also just trying different mediums. Because you might like one thing, you might really hate working in another way. I guess it's just giving yourself time and space to experiment and analyze, and never stop doing that. Like you don't find your style and then that's it, it's done. It's always evolving. So if like you look at your favorite illustrators' portfolios, like even my own portfolio, the work I was doing a year ago is different to what I do now, and then 5 years ago it was even more different, and then 5 years in the future it'll be different to what I'm doing now. It's a continual evolution.
Do you take that work out of your portfolio if you send it out, or would you leave it in? If you you don't really do anymore in the same way.
I always like, I'm conscious of my portfolio. Like I curate it. I curate things that I want to. I guess in terms of work, it's like, what do I want to carry on doing? So if there's something that I don't want to do anymore, so my work at the minute, I've moved away from editorial. I used to do a bit of editorial. I don't really do that anymore. So my portfolio now doesn't have those kind of things in it. So it's all about, thinking about the future, what you want to be known for, what you want to carry on doing, what work you enjoy doing, like keeping that in your portfolio and forgetting the rest. Although that said, I did have a client once, and a potential client that I didn't work with them in the end. So they were referred to me by an agency, and they're like, "Oh, we want to get you to do it as a Christmas card that we can send out to customers." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds amazing." They scrolled back right to the end of my Instagram and picked out some stuff from like 6 years ago. I don't work in that style anymore. There's nothing like that on my website at all. And they're like, "We want you to work like this." And I was like, "You scrolled through years and years of my Instagram posts and that's what you like?" I was really insulted. I was like, "What the hell is all this not good enough for you?" So yeah, that didn't work out.
Yeah, I've had that a few times where people just clearly went through everything and they're like, "This is the style that we want." You're like, that was like a doodle that I did on a napkin 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I then shared. It wasn't even like, that's not my style. It's just a picture that I posted once. Yeah, it does happen sometimes. I do find it quite funny. It does mean that they spend a lot of effort going through everything. There's this fly flying around.
Oh god.
Later. It's like this really, I think it comes from houseplants, these really small, like little fruit fly. Yeah.
I think it means like your plants are too wet, like the soil is too wet.
Yeah. But they're only in my office and I only have one plant, which is, I can show you.
Oh.
It is my avocado pit.
I never get
which I'm very proud of because it has this long,
Yeah, we managed to get a plant and it had a few leaves on it and then it just died.
Yeah.
No idea why.
Do you have a garden? Do you like gardening?
Yeah. Well, actually, I've fallen out of love a little bit with gardening. Every year I used to like get really excited around February and plant seeds inside, and then you go through all the effort of nurturing these seedlings and planting them out, and it's not worth it.
It's lots of work.
I get like a handful of tomatoes that I can use, and slugs eat the rest.
One really sad sort of cucumber that's really dried out. You're like, I don't actually really want to eat it, but I've grown it, so I feel like I have to.
Like
Yeah,
this year I've only bought some herbs and some salad leaves. That's all I'm doing. In terms of flowers, like I've got like lots of daffodil and tulips that I've planted. Yeah, I'm very low maintenance with gardening. I like to get flowering shrubs and then just keep it at that. Flowering shrubs and bulbs. Anything else is too much effort.
I always have these big dreams that I think that I really like doing things like DIY and gardening, and I think I'm really hands-on, but in reality I'm really lazy and I don't really like these things.
I would love to be good at DIY. Like I just don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I really recognize them. Am I forgetting anything? I think like I've sort of covered quite a lot already, but is there anything that you want to share that I've got to ask you?
I don't know, I guess
anything that you're working on at the moment that you're really excited about that you want to share?
Oh, at the minute it's gone really quiet. So I've finished up some projects. So I've worked on 2 books this year. So I designed 1 book, and my friend did the illustrations. And I did an illustration set for it's like a gift book type thing about philosophy. And that was really fun, and it was really like easy to work on and easy to work with the editors. And then I had like a really bad client experience, which I can't talk about because it's still ongoing. And then it's a bit quiet at the minute, but it usually is for me around this time, like when the end of the tax year and the new start of the tax year. But I kind of I repositioned my business, so I'm trying to operate more as a creative studio rather than a freelancer. And I'm like working on my website. It's launched, but there's still some stuff that needs fixing on it. And I'm hoping to kind of work more with direct clients rather than like studios or art directors. Like I want to be the art director, like directing my own projects. So it's a bit of a strange one because everything I knew about like contacting clients it's gone out the window a little bit because who I'm contacting has changed a little bit. So before I could email an art director and just be like, oh, hey, here's my portfolio. But you can't really do that with, I don't know, a different kind of brand because it just doesn't work. Like it's more of like a sales process with them. So I'm figuring that out.
So when you say you move from freelancer to art studio and you want to be more the art director, have more your own project, what would that sort of mean in practice? Like what sort of projects? So that might be a really big question, but so say before there's like an editorial, they need a few illustrations, they contact you or you send out your portfolio and then they commission you to do that illustration. How would that, what does it mean if you're a studio? How would that go? Would you then hire other illustrators? How would that work?
That's a very good question, and I'm still figuring it out. But in terms of hiring other illustrators, I probably wouldn't want to do that. I would want to still be the illustrator, but I'm looking to work more with copywriters and photographers and maybe other designers to kind of do like a whole project. So like if you're a freelancer, you're a small part in somebody else's project. Whereas I want to be leading a project for a client, whether it's like a design project, branding project, packaging project, whatever it is. But I be leading it. I'm that client's strategic partner. And then I bring in other people, other like talented independent creatives and like form a team specific to that client's needs. How to do it? I don't know. I'm still working it out.
I think it's fun, and I think it's really good to be ambitious as well. It's good to want to grow and to change, and learn. And and who knows? Maybe in 5 years' time, everyone's like, oh, the Taaryn, illustration agency that everyone knows. Like, who knows? You don't know, do you? Like, it's good to
that's the dream.
Yeah, it's good to evolve that way. I think it's interesting because I'm at the stage where I quite like a really specific brief. So if someone asks me, like, sometimes it's not necessarily the more specific the better, but I think to be that small cog, and just someone tells you what to do and then I do it and then they're happy with it or not happy with it. I quite like that process at the moment, but I can see if I was a few years further, and you're a few years further in your career than I am, that it's nice to change that and have a bit more input in what is actually happening. So I can see that that is something that
I mean, I'm not against being like the small part in someone else's project. So the book that I mentioned that I did earlier, like I was a tool in someone else's project, but I enjoyed it because they respected the work that I do. So I guess I wanted to change the kind of people I work with. So if I'm gonna do that kind of work, you know, there has to be like mutual respect, and which, I mean, it should be a given, but it's not really sometimes, is it? But yeah, I'm just being more conscious of who I spend my time working with. And where
and
my
also
work
get paid
goes.
a bit more, hopefully. That's
yeah, that would be good too.
Yeah, it's just reality, isn't it? Because sometimes life as a freelancer can be a little bit uncertain at times, because you have months. Well, I'm sure this is for you. I don't know. I'm filling this in, but where you have months where you do really well, and then you have months where you maybe not have any projects, where you're living off your savings, or and it just goes up and down. So I think if that becomes more steady at a slightly higher level, that's a nice feeling, and that's a point where you want to grow to at some point, I think.
I mean, I'm hoping I can get there. Like, I'm in a quiet period right now, but I'm hoping like towards the end of the month in May it'll pick up, because it usually does around that time for me. Like, I know which times of the year I'm quiet. Like, I can predict it, so it's not like it's not unexpected, but still not a nice feeling.
No, it makes the panic feeling a little bit less if you know that it's an occurring thing. But it's true, isn't it? Do you have any tips for anyone who's thinking of starting a creative career or who wants to pick up? And I think that's a really good, maybe last question. Any other tips that are not in your book yet, maybe, or maybe they are?
Well, yeah, buy the book because it's got a lot of information in it. I think the thing that I wish I did when I first started out is to see myself as a business, and just be conscious of how I'm putting myself across, because how you're positioning yourself and how you talk about the work that you do, clients are going to see it like that. So if you're putting yourself down and you're like not recognizing the value of your own work, clients aren't going to be able to see that either. And you're more likely to have bad client relationships. But yeah, since I started thinking of myself as a business and investing in my business, that's when things have kind of taken off for me. So yeah, definitely don't neglect that side of things. Like, art and drawing pictures is really fun. I would forget about the business side, but prioritize it.
That's so true. And I think it's not just how you speak to potential clients, but also how you speak to your family and friends. And because if you say to everyone like, oh, I just made a few little drawings and they're not very good, but I'm trying to sell them, then they are also going to say, oh, this is just a hobby that she has and we'll see how it works out. And then if you like, that all sort of piles up to sort of an imposter syndrome. But if you're confident in what you do and you're happy to put it out there, and I went to the Bologna Children's Book Fair last year. I couldn't go this year. And there's so much art out there in so many different styles. And it's really, have you ever been? It's really...
No, I've not been, no.
Well, even if you don't do any children's books, it's still really interesting to see how many different illustrations, styles and ways and materials, and how all these different books are made. And for me, it really made me feel like, oh, there is a place for any art style. I don't need to do anyone else's style. I can just because there's so many different ones out there. And just to feel confident in what you do and see it as, it doesn't matter what your craft is, or if you work digital or traditional, or just,
there's room for everybody.
It really is, which, I thought was really lovely discovery. You can feel a bit insecure sometimes, and it's I think everyone has that sometimes. And then thank you so much for talking to me today. I found it really interesting, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours more. Easily. I will make sure that I list your website and all your sort of social media handles and everything in the show notes, so make sure that people can find you. And and I'll make sure that I put everything in there. So thank you so much. I really, really loved it. And thank you for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Like, these questions have been really, really interesting and made me think a little bit.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.